In this episode, I'll be interviewing Lulu Alarmali, who is a functional nutritionist in Kuwait. She is someone who takes a truly integrative approach when it comes to health optimization and body composition. She works with everyone from the general population to competitive athletes. This is a great episode if you'd like to learn more about weight management, metabolic health, blood sugar, and how to maximize your progress if you're on a body composition journey. Lulu has a postgraduate degree in sports nutrition via the International Olympic Committee and studied at the Institute of Functional Medicine. She completed a 2-year fellowship in gut health, immune function, neurology, cardiovascular health, and medicine, as well as continues her education in the form of seminars and courses that share cutting-edge insights into health. Her training in functional medicine is also centered more around how each bodily system is connected, so her approach is truly integrative, in which she focuses on all pillars of health when she treats a patient. Her main areas of focus are gut health, hormone health, clinical burnout, sleep optimization, brain and cognitive health, including mental health and energy. What sets her apart is that she has a great grasp of nutritional knowledge when it comes to body composition and fat loss in terms of calories, training, metabolic flexibility, and stress, which are some of the topics we'll be diving into today. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Lulu, welcome back. I am so thrilled to have you here again. Our first conversation on gut health was amazing. It got so many views. If any of you haven't listened to it yet, it's episode 5. Please go check it out. So Lulu, thanks again for being here and being ready and willing to share your information with us again.
My pleasure. Always a pleasure speaking to you. I'm excited because this is a topic that we have argued about in the past. So it's going to be nice to put it into a podcast and have people hear 2 perspectives on the importance of calories for fat loss or just in general.
Healthy debate, I would say. But I think
Yes.
Also you and I have always reached a conclusion that was pretty much the same around calories and weight gain, weight loss, metabolism, but we just kind of have a different approach to it. So I'm really excited to unpack it with you today and to share this important topic with everybody. So let's start simply with the whole conversation around calories in, calories out, and if calories matter at all.
Okay, so calories definitely matter. I find this is one of the almost dividing points between the functional approach and then the standard if it fits your macros approach. The people who are traditionally trained in nutrition and weight loss argue that a calorie is a calorie no matter what. And then you have people that are trained in functional medicine that discuss that you can eat. The calories don't matter as long as your food is whole foods or whatnot. But the reality is not both are true. Calories do matter and the quality of your food matters. I think the link between those two is that people in the functional medicine world or just in the functional holistic health world say calories don't matter as long as you eat whole foods, are failing to understand that people who eat whole foods generally have more regulated appetites and are more satiated because they are consuming protein. So they ultimately end up eating less calories, which puts them in a calorie deficit, or, they're in a calorie deficit compared to what they were eating before. So therefore they lose weight because of the calorie component. And then people that are in the traditional nutritionally trained category where they focus only on calories and macros, and they don't even focus that much on macros. I think they prioritize protein alone, fail to realize that the type of calorie, the type of food that you eat impacts the way that you process that food. So blood sugar comes into place. People with insulin resistance, it's really not just about calories. Yes, they do have to be in a calorie deficit, but it's not enough to just be in a calorie deficit. People who have poor thyroid health, their metabolism is slower, so then they're unable to burn calories as effectively as someone that doesn't have a thyroid issue. So then it just gets complicated because calories do matter, but the quality of your food matters, your blood sugar regulation matters, your thyroid health matters, how satiated you feel matters so that you are able to be in a calorie deficit, but it also, your calorie deficit has to make sense. So if you're not healthy, if you don't have a healthy thyroid or healthy metabolism, your calorie deficit may be 900 calories, which is just unacceptable. because who's going to live off of 900 calories? So then we have to focus on the holistic health component so that they're able to lose weight on 1,500 calories. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and this was kind of a point of contention between us in the past. Again, like healthy arguing, healthy debating, but we both said the same thing. You're just someone who says calories matter, and I was someone who says I don't focus on calories. But what we're saying essentially is that the quality of the calorie matters, and because the work that I do is really focused on eating whole foods and focusing on satiation and overall lifestyle, as you said, a person gets more satiated and they naturally get into that deficit, or they stop snacking, or they stop some of that unhealthy habits around food, and some of their cravings go away. So then calories just kind of fix themselves in a sense. Or the amount of food that a person is consuming just kind of regulates. And for me, I always thought like a calorie is a measurement, but it's an incomplete metric and is not sufficient in when, talking
when
to
you're
a
looking
client
at
or
someone's
when you're looking at someone's
yes.
food intake or overall health or overall wellness, because I do like, a very holistic approach to a person's health. The way I approach someone's health and wellness is quite holistic in that sense. And I know you do too, but I appreciate how we both agreed that, the quality of the calorie matters. 100 calories from Coca-Cola versus a broccoli will have a very different impact on the overall system, on your blood sugar, on your hormones, on your gut health, and can impact how you feel 2 hours later and the cravings you have later, on brain fog, et cetera, et cetera. So this is where it's like, it's a metric, it's a measurement, but it's incomplete when we're discussing overall health or weight loss, weight gain, metabolism, et cetera. And I think we both agree on that. You discussed calorie deficit. Now, in the past, you and I have talked about being in a calorie deficit as something important if someone wants to lose weight. And by weight loss, we really mean like fat loss. But you've also said that we can't be too restrictive and we can't be in a deficit for too long because it impacts thyroid health. And it also can lower the amount of calories that we eventually burn, or the amount of fat we burn. And that's not good. And so what you do, I've learned with your program, is sometimes you put someone in a calorie deficit and then a calorie surplus to like change it up for them. Can you please unpack that for us and explain it to us and why you do it?
Yes, it's really important. It's the majority of my clients that are like this, because typically people are not going to go to a functional practitioner if all they have to do to lose weight is to follow a standard 1,200 calorie meal plan and lose weight. So people don't realize that every time you diet or every time you restrict your calories, your thyroid eventually slows down to match your calorie intake, or your metabolism slows down to match your calorie intake. And this has been shown in studies. So the typical complaint that I'll hear is, whenever I wanted to lose weight in the past, I just do this diet and I lose weight. And this time I'm trying everything and it's not working. So what ends up happening is someone who decides they want to lose weight will go from maybe eating 2,200 calories to 1,800 calories. And they'll do it by, I'm just going to reduce my food intake slightly and I'll lose weight. The problem is when they maintain the 1,800 calories for a while, their metabolism is going to slow down to match the 1,800 calories. So now 1,800 calories is not weight loss calories for them anymore. And then what they'll do the next time they try to lose weight is they're going to have to do 1,600 calories. And then the next time they have to lose weight, they're going to notice that the 1,800 calories is no longer working for them. So now they're going to be like, well, I need to cut carbs. When they cut carbs, they're cutting out a huge portion of their calories. So now their calorie intake or their weight loss calories are 1,500 calories. And what these people are going to notice is that the food that they used to eat before is now their weight gain calorie intake. So their standard lifestyle from a few years ago, if they've been yo-yo dieting over the last few years, is now their weight gain. They're in weight gain category. And this keeps happening. The most severe form of this is, I saw a girl that was 40% body fat and she was eating 700 calories and she was training like crazy. She was doing Orange Theory. And I knew that she was eating 700 calories because we were tracking her food. She was showing me her food log. I don't even know if that's true, because I remember a few years ago, I saw a woman who was very overweight. She was at least 30 kilos overweight. And she was eating 600 calories. Her dinner was half a cup of corn. And she wasn't losing weight. And these people just have a history of yo-yo dieting. So every time you reduce your calorie intake, if you do not reverse diet out of it to teach your body that there's food coming in and you have to burn it, your metabolism is going to slow down to whatever lowest calorie intake you've had to do to lose weight. So what I do is, and this is where calories do matter. I think this is where we've had a debate before where like we'll share a client, well, I'll do their gut health and their diagnostics, and then you'll take care of their lifestyle and habits. And you'll say, these are way too many numbers. I really don't want them counting calories. I want to teach them more about whole foods. And I'll say we have to be specific about the calories, because when your body is burning 1,200 with training 5 days a week, if you eat 1,600 calories, you're going to gain weight. And then that's going to put the client in kind of mental distress, because they're going to be like, I know I should be eating more. I shouldn't be this restricted with my food. So I'm going to eat normally, healthily, a whole foods diet, and then they gain weight on that whole foods diet, and then they restrict themselves, and then they're, even restricting to 1,200 isn't working now. So then they get frustrated. So then they're like, well, let me listen to my body and try intuitive eating. So they end up in this cycle, almost a vicious cycle. And in this case, calories do matter, because we have to match their current calorie intake. So we have to see how much their body is burning. And you do that by tracking their food and their exercise. And then you have to slowly, gradually increase their calories over time. And when you do that, you're teaching the body to burn more food. But if you go from you're only burning 1,200, even with high intensity classes 6 days a week, so let's feed you 1,800 calories, that jump in calories is unfortunately going to make them gain weight. So you can see how it gets a little complicated.
Yeah. And so the reason that you and I have talked about calories in the past with these types of clients is because I look into the mental component and the psychological component of their relationship to food. There's a whole psychology of eating, and there's also a psychology of how they kind of perceive themselves, body image. And a lot of these clients, if they've been yo-yo dieting, or they have a body image issue, or sometimes body image dysmorphia, then there's a mental health component that comes to play. And if they've been yo-yo dieting, they've probably been doing this for many months, if not many years. A lot of the clients we share, it's been many years. There's an orthorexia that can come into play, which is an obsession around eating well or dieting perfectly. And if there isn't an orthorexia, there can be some disordered eating habits. So when they start to look at food as calories and macros and numbers, and they weigh themselves a lot, I have to unpack the psychological component of that. Otherwise, they're just kind of in this perpetual dieting state, and it doesn't improve their relationship to food. And in my experience, when you don't improve their relationship to food or to their bodies, it's almost impossible to sustain, I don't want to say a diet, but like a healthy lifestyle, because they might be able to get on a diet, but then it doesn't sustain. And it's just like, let me quickly do this for a few weeks or a month and then fit into the dress or the skinny jeans, and then the weight comes back again. Because mentally, it's not sustainable. It's not about weight loss for, a quick fix. It's more like to fit into that dress or something. It's more like, how do I help them achieve that overall lifestyle and help them get out of that disordered eating pattern? And when you and I work together and you say, listen, I need to know about their calories, or I need them to increase calories, that's absolutely fine. I just don't want them counting it. Because
that makes sense. Yeah. So that they don't get obsessed with the numbers.
They don't get obsessed with it.
I feel like that's where education comes in, though, because I do have clients that come in and they say, this is not every client. There are clients that don't have metabolic damage, and they're completely capable of using, their hand as a portion control guide, or eyeballing food. But there are people where you have to, they're like, I really don't want to count calories, but I've tried everything and I'm not losing weight. When you explain to them, you have to look at this as a treatment. This is no longer about, let's reduce your food intake to make sure that you lose weight. This is more about, there's something has gone wrong in your body on a cellular level, because it affects your mitochondria. It's called mitochondrial deficiency. I can explain that in a little bit. So there's something wrong in your body on a cellular level, and you have to treat this as if you're, adjusting dysfunction in the body, or like treating a disease or something along those lines. And then when you explain to them how it works, and you say, listen, this is just a short-term intervention of restriction. I think what people misunderstand is that they think that if you have to do a low-carb diet, the low-carb diet is not sustainable. And in reality, you only need to do low carb for a couple of weeks, just so you can kind of like resensitize your cells, and then kind of like teach your body how to accept carbs over a long term. And then by the 3-4 month mark, you will be eating very regularly. And then that's where the habits and whatnot take place.
And also something really important that you mentioned is how the thyroid slows down when you're not eating enough. And I want people to understand that evolutionarily, if you're like super restricted or you're starving, because having 600, 700, 800 calories for a woman or a man who's going to the gym and has an active life and has work to do and is using their cognitive facilities, their cognitive faculties, that's all burning energy. And if you're not giving the body the energy or the nutrition it needs, the body thinks it's starving. So it's not a time to burn through fat, right? The body's fat stores is literally energy storage. So the body will freak out a little bit and will suppress metabolism, suppress the thyroid as a way to keep that energy on the body, because it thinks it's in a starvation mode, which is why I also explain to clients who are not seeing the weight loss that they want, and then they're super restricting. I've said, you actually need to eat to like boost your metabolism again, or to like support your thyroid, because your body thinks it's starving.
Yes.
And so that's a really important point. And then you're talking about a client that goes to Orange Theory all the time and also restricts calories. That high cortisol, which is a stress hormone for those who don't know, is not going to help you lose weight. If you're doing HIIT all the time, especially for women of reproductive age, Lulu, I'm sure you can unpack this further, but too much cortisol for a woman of reproductive age, but even a man who's really stressed and is already dealing with some adrenal fatigue or cortisol issues, you're not going to lose weight, and you're especially not going to lose that visceral fat, which is around the belly. So you have to also manage that and not do too much and have too much of a cortisol spike. Would you agree?
I do agree. I do think I have seen this trend on TikTok, on Instagram, where people, or girls especially, are like, this is what I eat every day to balance my hormones. And if you ask them what are hormones, they probably wouldn't know how to answer it. So I do think that there's a bit of a and you know, cortisol is a buzzword. It's been a buzzword for the last few years, but I feel like more and more so, where girls are like, this is how I keep my cortisol at bay to lose weight, and they don't really understand the mechanism of it. So let's talk a little bit about cortisol and stress and overtraining, because it's more complicated than it sounds. You are supposed to produce cortisol when you work out. That's a healthy stress response. The problem is, if you're already stressed out from your day-to-day life, you're not sleeping enough, you're not eating enough, you're putting your body in a starvation mode, and then you go and you do these HIIT exercises or super high intensity exercise, you can counteract the negative effects of cortisol by fueling well. So this is one of the things I think that we were discussing. So women especially, men can get away with a lot more. I'll talk about the impact of cortisol on belly fat in a little bit, because that's a little bit different. But women especially, when you don't eat before your workout, so when you train in a fasted state, you actually, first of all, don't burn as much during your workout, and you don't burn as much in the 24-hour period after your workout. There is a cap to how many calories you burn based on how well fueled you are. So it's very counterproductive to limit your calorie intake, especially pre or post-workout, because what's going to end up happening is you're going to feel like you've done a really intense exercise, because it's called rate of perceived exertion. So you're going to feel so tired and like, oh my God, I sweated so much and I must have burned so many calories. But in reality, your body has shut down or reduced the amount of calories that you burn, because it's just not fueled enough. And that's why I tell girls, or guys even, whatever your watch tells you is not an accurate predictor or accurate indicator of how many calories you actually burn, because that's based on your heart rate and so on and so forth. It's not tracking your calories. So it's very possible that your watch says you burn 600 calories, but in reality, you only burn 200 calories. So working out in a fasted state or in an underfueled state, there's a cap on how many exercise that you can burn. So if you're supposed to burn 600 calories in that workout, but you're underfueled, your body's gonna cap it. So it's gonna put a limit to how many calories you burn, and then you won't burn as much during the day. So working out in a fed state for women will allow you to burn more calories during the workout and more calories after the workout. And cortisol comes into place because cortisol is catabolic. So cortisol ends up breaking down tissue if it's too high for too long. You need cortisol. I think we've discussed this in one of our previous podcast episodes together. You do need cortisol. It is a healthy response to exercise, but too much of it for too long will break down your muscle. And it does, over time, cause belly fat because it's just a evolutionary response to kind of store fat around your belly or your organs when you're in a starved state. But I think that has more to do with chronic stress, but 100% under eating and overtraining, even if you're the most mentally calm, chill person, is going to increase your cortisol in a way that will burn muscles from your extremities. So it'll break down muscles in your arms and legs, but then it will store fat in your belly. So you end up being a little bit of a apple shaped, if that makes sense. So like skinny arms and legs, but then your belly is a little bit rounder. And that's a consequence of long-term elevated cortisol.
But also, just to reiterate something that you said that's so important, it's something I share with my female clients, is if you're not eating or you don't take in, because I don't always like to eat a big breakfast before I train, but I'll have banana, I'll have some kind of fat. So the banana is like my carbs, also some kind of fat, MCT oil, coconut oil, olive oil, and then I'll have some protein, either an egg or two, or maybe even collagen. The idea is I'm giving myself some calories. I'm giving myself like some kind of form of protein and carbs and nutrition, because I want people to understand, especially women, that if you go to the gym and like overexert, you can break down muscle instead of build muscle at the gym. Your body will use the muscle for energy. And it's like mind-blowing for people. They'll take a coffee and they'll go.
There is actually, I mean, I'm glad you said a banana and whatnot. There is actually a kind of a requirement for women in terms of macros. So ideally, they should eat 15 grams of protein in their pre-workout meal and 15 to 30 grams of carbs. Surprisingly, they need more carbs if they're going to do cardio than if they're going to do a strength training session. So consuming that, you get 30 grams of carbs from a banana. But I think you do collagen in your coffee as well, you mentioned, so that you probably get 15 grams there. So it can be something really simple. It doesn't have to be a full-on meal. You can do a collagen latte that's sweetened with honey, and that's enough to support calorie burning during and after your workout. But you do have to eat within an hour after training. So a smoothie would go really well here, and that should also include about 30 grams of protein and 30 grams of carbs. And this also supports your cellular health because one of the ways that people develop metabolic damage, aside from cortisol and aside from thyroid and aside from just like, a general slowing down of the metabolism, is that your mitochondria exists in your cells, and your mitochondria is what turns the carbs, fats, protein, and that you eat for energy. There's something called the cell danger response, which is really interesting, which is when your cells or your mitochondria are alerted that your body is under stress or in danger. So one of the side effects of restricting your calorie intake or under eating and overtraining is that your mitochondria become very, very good at using less energy, using less food to make more energy, which isn't good. It sounds good. It sounds like, oh, my mitochondria are super efficient and they're, doing a really good job of kind of stretching out my calorie. But think about it. If your mitochondria gets really good, so if you're training your body to do 5 days of training plus your 12K steps on 1,200 calories per day, and then your mitochondria gets used to it. It's like, okay, these are the only calories I'm going to get. So I need to make sure I can use those calories for my immune system, my heart to function properly, for my liver to detox properly, for me to actually be able to have energy not only during my workout, but after the workout, for me to have mental clarity and for my brain to work properly. So I'm going to take these 1,200 calories and I'm going to like stretch them out so that I can get every single thing I can get out of them. When you then eat an extra 300 calories in the form of a slice of cake or a snack, your mitochondria doesn't need those 300 calories for energy. It already knows how to create energy from 1,200 calories. So you're going to store it as fat. So that's one of the important things about reverse dieting, which is to do it so slowly and so gradually, because you're kind of teaching your mitochondria, hey, there's a little bit of food coming in. You don't have to, like work as hard with these 1,200 calories. But if all of a sudden it sees, you know, a slice of cake, it's going to be like, store it. I don't need it. You already taught me how to save all these, you know, little calories to support your life. And that's why there are a lot of girls that are overweight, which I see all the time. They're like 30-40% body fat. They're eating nothing, and they're able to strength train 4 times a week, plus do a HIIT class, plus hit their steps. And they're coming to me and they're like, why am I not losing weight? I'm like, you taught your body how to do this. Now you have to teach it that there's food coming in a way that's not going to make you gain weight. And guess what? It's going to take you months. It's not a quick fix, because now your cells are involved, your thyroid is involved, your general metabolic health is involved. And it becomes less about calories in, calories out, and more about how do I fix the damage that I've created.
It causes metabolic damage. Also the yo-yo dieting, because I see a lot of clients who will do this, overtrain, undereat, and then they can't take it anymore, and then they have binge episodes. And these are the kind of clients that you also refer on to me to help them manage that disordered eating habits. And so that's yo-yo dieting. A lot of calories coming in at one go, and usually junk calories, and then starving themselves. And this is so metabolically damaging. And also what you're talking about is just how to be healthy in general, but also if you want to lose weight. And I get this a lot as well. I have clients who are a little bit overweight, some of them more, but I'm just thinking of one recently, and she's not she's not obese, she's not super overweight. Maybe she has like what I call vanity weight to lose. She wants to just change her body composition, where there's nothing wrong with that. You know, you have 5 kilos to lose, you want to look better, you want to feel better, that's fine. And she's like, I just had a turkey sandwich all day. And I love talking to clients who come to me who want to lose weight, and I have to say to them, you're not eating enough. They are flabbergasted. They're like, but I want to lose weight. And I'm like, yeah, you need to eat more, and you need to eat better, and you still need to move and fix your sleep, and we'll manage your stress and all those things. And I need to like get you to eat vegetables for your gut microbiome, because that's going to help. You know, it's a whole picture. But I love the look on their face when I'm saying, when they come to me specifically for weight loss, and I say you need to eat more. It's great. But I love that you're providing clients for it too. I want to ask you about men quickly. I know most of our audience and listeners, I think, are women, but for men, you know, how about them being in a fasted state and restricting calories? I know their body can handle more stress than women, especially women of reproductive age. But what about men and muscle and metabolic health and fasting and all the things we talked about?
Yeah, with men, it's really interesting because they really can get away with a lot more than women can. And you see it in couples where like, a married couple will come in and the girl would be like, we're both doing the same diet and he's losing so much more weight than me. So for a man, he can go down to 15 calories. It's called fat-free mass. So it's basically 15 calories per kilogram of muscle and bone and whatnot. So basically, if you're 30% body fat, you remove the 30% of weight and you multiply 15 calories by the leftover weight. It sounds complicated. But anyway, they can go down to 15 calories per kilo of fat-free mass before their body signals that they're in starvation mode. But for women, they can only go down to 30 calories per kilogram of fat-free mass before their body signals that they're in starvation mode. So just to give you an idea, if a man and a woman both have 50 kilos of fat-free mass, the guy can go down to 750 calories and still lose weight without any issues before his body starts to notice that he's in starvation mode. But for a woman, she can only go down to 1,500 calories per 50 kilos of fat-free mass. And can you imagine how many? That's probably an 80-kilo woman. Can you imagine for someone who's 60 kilograms and she probably has 30 kilos of fat-free mass? That's
You've lost me a little bit with the math, but I'm glad that you're talking about it because I want people to hear it. But in layman's terms, you're basically saying that men can kind of go into what a starvation diet would look like for a woman and be okay. Can you share with us, like, should they be training fasted, or
they can be training fasted? Yes, they can be training fasted. They can have, although interestingly enough, women are more susceptible to side effects from intermittent fasting, from long-term intermittent fasting, which is true because of their hormones, and they can't really signal, starvation mode to their body because of their reproductive cycle. But both men and women start to see negative effects of intermittent fasting on their blood sugar markers after the 14-hour mark. So from a metabolic perspective, in terms of, will they get into starvation mode? Will it affect their weight? Men can definitely fast for longer, and they can. I actually don't think they should. They can get away with eating one big meal a day, because I do think that it causes metabolic damage, probably from its effect on your blood sugar and your cortisol levels. Because when you don't eat for a while, your blood sugar crashes, and then your cortisol goes up. So then your blood sugar, sugar is released from your liver into your blood, and then you run out of that, and then your blood sugar crashes again. So you're so dysregulated during the day from not eating enough. But I'm just speaking from a metabolic perspective in terms of metabolism and calories. Yes, men can get away definitely with training fasted with no side effects, or much less side effects than women, and they can get away with eating less per kilogram of weight than women can.
But in general, without like having or impacting their cortisol or their overall health, would you just recommend 2 wholesome meals for men? They can train fasted and then eat afterwards, or eat before and then go work out, and then have another meal like 4 hours before they sleep. Because I know men who are, under eating and overtraining, and then I think there's some stress and some cortisol issues, and so their sleep is now affected. And so that's what I'm coming to. Is like, what's the healthy way to do this? Is like, feed yourself properly. You can be in a deficit for men and not be too triggering on the body, but we don't want it to like domino effect into your sleep. Would you agree?
I would say it's more complicated than that, because it really depends on your lifestyle, your current stress levels, your history of your stress levels, what impact that's had on your sleep, how much movement you engage in during the day. Do you have rest and relaxation? Do you have good metabolic flexibility, so that when your body runs out of carbs, can it switch into burning fat for your fuel without kind of getting into that stressed out zone of, I don't have energy to sustain my activities? So it's complicated. I would say if a man, even if he's a man and he can get away with less calories, if he's not a metabolically healthy man, so if he's overweight, has belly fat, doesn't sleep well, has a lot of different responsibilities, and it's kind of like spread a little thin, I definitely would not recommend anything less than 3 meals a day spread out, potentially with carbs, unless he has developed some kind of insulin resistance along the way. So it's still individual. I can't do a blanket statement. The only thing that I can say is they have a much bigger buffer before a calorie restriction starts to affect them than women. Women don't have a lot of space before a calorie restriction starts to affect their metabolism.
Lulu, I have to ask you about how sleep impacts metabolism and insulin and weight loss, because I know how important sleep is in overall health, but also in their body composition journey. Can you please unpack this for us?
Yes, I think the main way that sleep impacts body composition and fat loss is that if you're sleep deprived, which doesn't just look like I'm sleeping less than 7 hours a day. If you're not getting into deep sleep, if you're not getting into the repair mode, you're not going to produce growth hormone, you're not going to produce testosterone, which are super important for muscle building and fat loss. But also, I think 1 day of poor sleep increases your insulin levels and messes up your blood sugar regulation, increases your risk of heart disease. So you should be prioritizing sleep, because let's say you are one of these people that struggles to lose weight on a moderate carb diet. Let's say you're one of these people that does have to limit your carb intake to lose weight. That could be because you're not sleeping properly. So no amount of low carb diet is going to help you if there's, it will help momentarily, but it's not going to help you long term. It's not going to help reverse any kind of like insulin or blood sugar related issues if one of the main reasons keeps happening every single night, which is poor sleep. So good sleep looks like being able to fall asleep easily. If you can't, you have high nighttime cortisol, or you have melatonin dysregulation, or impaired melatonin production, which can happen from a day of high stress or chronic long-term stress. So that even if you get to a point where you're not stressed today, but the chronic long-term stress will still, your body's just kind of used to having high nighttime cortisol, and the impaired melatonin production could happen because you're getting low morning sunlight. So if you're just like waking up, you're not, getting sunlight in the morning, that can impact it. So you have to be able to fall asleep. You have to be able to stay asleep. If you wake up to pee, that's a sign of a cortisol issue, a blood sugar issue, or a sign that you're just not in deep enough sleep, because urine production, so your bladder is not supposed to produce urine when you're in deep sleep. And then when you wake up in the morning, you're not supposed to hit snooze a bunch of times before you finally get out of bed. And you're not supposed to need coffee to get out of bed. And you're not supposed to need coffee to function. So falling asleep, staying asleep, waking up refreshed, if any of those three are missing, you have a sleep issue. So fixing your sleep should be one of your top priorities.
Also, you mentioned morning sunlight, but people have to understand that evening blue light from your electronics will also postpone melatonin production. So you won't get to sleep as well or as quickly, as deeply. So we have to take care of like our blue light exposure at night, and you can wear those blue light blockers. I've got them. They're orange. They're amazing. Also, just a quick note, people need to know about is that we've got two very important hormones called ghrelin and leptin, and they regulate our satiation and our hunger. And those get dysregulated if we don't sleep well. So what that means is that we might crave more carbs the next day, or we don't get full the way we typically do when we've slept well. And so people are like craving all kinds of sugary or carby foods the next day, and they don't know why. Their body is literally looking for energy because they're tired. That's why their satiation is suppressed or their leptin is higher. So it might just feel even more like a struggle to manage what you're eating if you're not sleeping well, because you've got all these crazy cravings, and that's just coming from a poor night of sleep. So it's something to think about to make your journey a little bit easier. Why struggle so much if like that can be taken care of if you prioritize good, deep, adequate sleep?
Yeah, totally. Agreed.
I want to talk about insulin resistance, as you just mentioned. I know how important insulin sensitivity is to overall health, aging gracefully, and of course, fat loss. And we do have an issue of insulin resistance in Kuwait, in the world, and blood sugar issues. So let's dive into that, if you don't mind, I guess, starting us off.
So I think insulin resistance can get a little bit complicated from a nutritional perspective, because there's literature that shows that you can reverse insulin resistance by lowering your fats way down and having a carb-based diet, which is basically a low-fat vegetarian diet, because it's impossible to have a very low-fat diet when you're eating animal protein, because they have fat embedded in them. And there are studies and literature that have shown that you can reverse insulin resistance through a very low-carb, higher fat diet. So it seems like the combination of high fat and high carb and overconsumption of calories contributes to insulin resistance. And what happens is without complicating it too much, the cell, your cell has to accept the carbs that you've eaten every time you eat them, so they can burn them for energy. What happens when you're bombarding your cell over and over and over and over again with all these carbs, fats over and over again, meal, snack, junk food, fried foods, and whatnot, your cell cannot work properly anymore because it's just overloaded. So the receptors don't work because you've been kind of like, flinging all this food at them. So what happens is it can no longer accept the food that you're eating, especially the carbs. And then the carbs that you've eaten end up, instead of going inside the cell, they end up floating around in the blood until eventually at some point the cell accepts these carbs and takes them in. At that point, because you cannot have high blood sugar, like it's detrimental to your health. So when your carbs have been floating around in your blood because they cannot enter the cell, they end up getting stored as fat. So that is actually a really good case of where I've had clients that are in a calorie deficit, but I've looked at their history. I'm like, what were you eating before? And they're like, well, I was eating a lot of junk. And or I'll look at their food intake. So they will be eating 1,500 calories. Because most people that come in and tell me I can't lose weight no matter what I do, I tell them to do a food log so we can figure out where the problem is coming from. So they are eating 1,500 calories plus training 6 times a week. So they are technically in a calorie deficit, but their breakfast is 2 slices of bread plus several pieces of fruit, and then their snack is a bunch of dates, and then their lunch is rice and protein, and then they're eating a sugary snack in between lunch and dinner, and then their dinner is pastry. It's all calorie controlled. They're tracking their calories, but that's someone that's carbs following a history of unhealthy eating, their cell is probably unable to respond. So even the low calorie foods that they're eating, which I know if certain people were to listen to this, like especially the traditionally trained nutritionists will be like, no, like it doesn't matter. I've seen it matter. I've matched their calorie intake. So I'm like, yes, you're going to still continue eating 1,500 calories because I don't want to lower your food intake, but let's put you on a lower carb diet.
One way that I like to explain insulin resistance to my clients or to the layperson is to think of it like the boy who cried wolf, just for those who don't really understand it. So the story goes, the boy was out in the woods and he cried wolf, saying that there's a wolf coming to, harm him, and asked the villagers to come and help. And there was no wolf. It was a joke. So villagers came, they saw there was no wolf, and they left. And he did this a couple of times. And then eventually the villagers stopped believing that he was in danger.
Mm-hmm.
And so the demand kind of went down. And then one day the wolf did show up and he really cried wolf and no one showed up. And the point of the story is that the pancreas is the organ that is releasing insulin. And if the body keeps demanding insulin over and over and over again, the call for the insulin, the demand for it starts to go down. And then the body is no longer being able to be sensitive to the call. So what does that mean? When you demand insulin when you eat, especially carbs, as you said, sugary foods, I guess even like proteins and fats to some extent. But if you're doing this too much, you're calling on the pancreas way too much and putting too much demand that it stops being sensitive to the call and actually can tire out the pancreas. So it's just the idea is that we don't want to be resistant to the call. We don't want insulin resistance. We want to be sensitive to the call. And as you said, if we're not, it impacts blood sugar, it impacts weight gain because eventually that excess carbs is floating around, ends up being stored as fat. So it's just a little like story I like to share because I feel like it kind of
I love that. I love that. I'm going to start using it.
I want to ask you about some supplements. There's one in particular, L-carnitine. And I wanted to get your take on that because it's meant to help sensitize the body to use fat as fuel. And I also know that you like glutamine. I like it for leaky gut, but you're using it as a fat loss tool. Can you unpack those for us?
Well, not many people know this, but if you take glutamine before bed, it increases your growth hormone production while you sleep. And when you have higher growth hormone production, you are generally leaner and are able to build more muscle. So it's a very good supplement to take, especially before bedtime. I do like L-carnitine because it helps support mitochondrial function. So typically, if I think someone has mitochondrial issues, I'll give them some supplements that support mitochondrial function. So CoQ10, PQQ, carnitine, and I recommend that they take it before their workout. And if they take it before their workout, it will kind of, stimulate or kind of, trigger the body to use fat for fuel, or support mitochondrial function for burning energy.
Okay, amazing. Are there any lab tests you would recommend that people who don't have like a chronic health condition get done to ensure that they are first considering their overall health, but as it pertains to, improving their body composition, whether they want to gain weight or lose weight? Because I know that like vitamin D is a very important vitamin or hormone to regulate, and your journey is going to be so much more difficult if that's not optimal. Is there anything else you would share with people that they should just get sorted and any deficiencies sorted?
Yeah, I would definitely do a blood sugar panel. So a fasting blood sugar, a 3-month blood sugar, which is your HbA1c, and it's interesting because the optimal range is where you're healthy, and then there's a normal range where it's I think anything above a 5.8 is considered pre-diabetic. In some people, a 5.7 is considered. In some labs, a 5.7 is considered pre-diabetic. So there are people that are 5.6 and they think they're normal. 5.6, if you're not gorging on carbs, is not normal. If you're eating a normal diet, carbs at breakfast, carbs at lunch, carbs at dinner, and your HbA1c is 5.6, that just means those carbs are floating around and sticking onto your red blood cells instead of getting used up by your cell. So HbA1c is a really good indicator. Obviously, if you've been traveling and you've been eating pasta and pastries and croissants and like all kinds of stuff for months, and your HbA1c is 5.6, that makes sense. It's a reflection of how much carbs you've been eating. So that's a good one. Fasting insulin is also a really good one, because when you're fasting, you're not supposed to have elevated insulin levels because there's no sugar triggering the pancreas, supposedly. So if your fasting blood sugar is typically anything over a 6, because the range also starts at 25. So some people can be 20 or 18 and they think they're normal. But anything over a 6 when you're fasting is not a good, is an indicator of some, of at least the beginning of insulin resistance. So I think those are important. And then doing a comprehensive thyroid panel. So TSH, free T4, free T3, because you need to be able to convert free T4 to free T3. And if your liver isn't functioning properly and your gut isn't functioning properly, you'll be unable, like your body's going to produce your thyroid hormone, but it's not converting it. So then you actually can't use it because that's the active form. And then a general metabolic profile. So looking at your lipids, your nutrients. I think B12 is actually an interesting, B12 and ferritin are a really good indicator of gut health, because if you don't have good enough stomach acid, you're not, even though you're eating, B12 is in everything. It's in a lot of animal protein. It's in eggs, cheese, milk, all animal protein, most animal protein. So if you're eating a moderate protein diet and your B12 is low, that's already an indicator that there's something up with your absorption. Ferritin as well. So if you're eating a really healthy diet with like high protein foods, and your iron stores are low, indicator that there's something wrong with your absorption.
And iron is super helpful also just for energy. If you're low on iron or you're anemic, you're going to feel like going to the gym is climbing Mount Everest. So you want to get that sorted.
Yeah, it happened. I remember it happened to me because there was one time where I just wasn't training consistently. So like I started training and my coach would be like, go run on a treadmill for 2 minutes. And then just 2 minutes in, I'd be dying. And then when in a couple of weeks, it wasn't getting any better because I'd be dying. I'd be just like struggling for air. I was like, something's wrong. And I went and I did my ferritin and it was like 8. It was nothing. It was so low. It really, and then when I fixed it, I was able, because my body was able to oxygenate itself. I wasn't like panting for breath, 2 minutes into a light treadmill jog. And then if you do a blood test, you should definitely work with a functional practitioner, because there's this thing called, there's just a way of looking at certain blood markers and the patterns that they show up as that indicate something about your inflammation levels, whether you have like a chronic viral load, whether you have a chronic bacterial load that you're unaware of, if your body's trying to fight parasites, all of these things. So yeah, it all comes together. So yeah, muscle is important.
And something I've mentioned in a previous episode is also the range. When you work with a functional practitioner, they'll want you in the optimal range. But I get a lot of clients, for example, with vitamin D, the range is like 75 to 200, and they'll come back and their vitamin D is like 77, and the doctor won't flag it. The conventional doctor won't flag it because it's technically within range. But I'll say to my client, I'm like, if you can be 75 to 200, you don't want to be 77. You want to be like 100, 150. You want to be like smack in the middle for optimal health. And if functional will flag it, I might flag it. I don't always look at people's bloods because I don't practice medicine, but sometimes clients will share their bloods with me. And so that's the difference also between conventional, they're kind of just looking at numbers, and functional is looking at the overall picture. So that's an important point to make. I want to talk to you about muscle and how important it is for not just longevity. It's this organ of longevity, living well, feeling good, living long and healthy, but also as it pertains to fat loss and metabolic health.
So it's interesting because people think that the more muscle they have, the more calories they're going to burn, which is true, but it's not as many calories as you think. I think a pound of muscle, which is half a kilo of muscle, so let's say for every extra kilo of muscle that you gain from exercise, you're only going to burn an extra 25 to 30 calories per day, which is a bite of a date. Like, it's nothing. It's not even. So let's say you gained 5 kilos of muscle over the last year. It doesn't mean you can now eat an extra 300 calories. What it probably means is you can now eat an extra 150 calories. You know what I mean? It's really not that much. So the benefit of muscle, yes, it's important. Obviously, if you have, for increasing your calorie requirements, which means you can eat more. But it's really more important for metabolic health and blood sugar management, because your muscles absorb the carbs that you eat, store them as glycogen. So the more muscle you have, the more allowance for carbs and calories that you have. Someone with low muscle mass is not going to be metabolically healthy because they're going to be unable to process carbs efficiently.
Yeah. I heard someone say, and I use this a lot, I use this example a lot, if you were to spill some water on the table, how would you mop it up? With a Kleenex, with a tissue, or with a towel? The muscle is the towel.
I love that. Yeah.
The muscle is the towel. So if you're spilling if you're spilling sugar into your blood, when you have muscle, you're wiping it up with the towel, versus if you don't have muscle, it's just a tissue. And so
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it too, because it's really helpful, again, at like explaining and visualizing and conceptualizing how important muscle is. And you're right that we don't need to be, it's not about eating more, but it's about being more efficient with your food, with your blood sugar, and how it really can manage, because it's a glycogen store, right? It can help manage sugar in the body. And Lulu, what is skinny fat?
Skinny fat is when your weight is low or healthy, but your body fat percentage is really high and you're basically under muscled. It's actually not even about being over fat. It's like Dr. Gabriel Lyon says, it's not about being over fat, it's about being under muscled, especially in the skinny fat sense. And I see it a lot. And it doesn't really show in clothes because I do body fat analysis with skin folds. Basically, like when I'll go to like pinch someone's fat, their arm will be so small, so I'll expect to get this like tiny little pinch, and all I can grab is fat. So there's no muscle whatsoever. And that's only gonna, you're only gonna benefit from that for so long, in the sense of looking slim, because it's like we discussed about muscle and being and not having enough muscle. If you don't have enough muscle, you're not going to be metabolically healthy, and fat is going to stack on. Your body's just not going to look toned, quote unquote, which is what a favorite word. But it's just looking slim, but really having a high body fat percentage, which comes with all the risks of high body fat, regardless of your weight. So higher risk of insulin resistance, higher risk of heart disease, definitely lower longevity, lower health span, and it's short-lived. It's typically, I think you typically see it in, let's say like 20-year-olds that are slim, and then they get into their late 20s or early 30s, and their body starts to change or sag or drop or something along those lines, because they just don't have the muscle tone to support it.
There are common terms that circulate like online or in friendship circles of, I want to have a fast metabolism, or my metabolism is slow. They're comparing maybe their body to their friends who can eat 3 burgers and not gain weight. And there's this like term of fast and slow. First of all, does this actually exist? Is there such a thing as fast metabolism and slow? And what does it mean?
I do think it exists, because there are different body types. So you have someone who's like an ectomorph, someone who's an endomorph. I do believe that there is some validity to that. And I know we do a lot of genetic testing, and there are people that genetically, there are certain genes that make you kind of require more calories for the activity that you're doing, and there are ones that make you, the same gene, you require less calories. So I do think, but to be honest, the impact is so minimal. What I've seen repeatedly over and over and over again is that people who have generally had a healthy lifestyle since they're kids, so they're active, they move, they were involved in sports, their parents were health conscious, so like they weren't constantly eating junk and McDonald's and chips and cola and whatnot. Those people tend to have I would say healthier metabolism, but I think it's because of the environmental impact. I think people with a slow metabolism most of the time have a slow metabolism because of yo-yo dieting, because of a history of yo-yo dieting. The impact that genetics have on how many calories you burn compared to your friends, I think is minimal. I can see this from experience. People always thought that I had a super fast metabolism because they'd see me, I was super skinny, and they'd see me kind of like eating pasta and cake. But what they didn't see was that that's all I would eat for the day. And then the rest of the day, I just had like no appetite and I would undereat. So I would, when I was trying to gain weight or gain muscle, I would track my calorie intake and I'd be like, oh my God, I ate so much today. Like I'm definitely on track to gaining muscle. And I think I've eaten 1,800 calories, but I'll track my food and it'll be 1,100, 1,200. So the people that are like, oh, like my best friend, my friend ate so much and she doesn't gain weight. You're probably only seeing her eat so much in that one meal and you don't know what she's doing the rest of the day. I'm also very fidgety. You can probably, if you look back to the video, I'm just like moving around a lot. Like my arms are moving, my legs are shaking. So people that fidget a lot actually burn, I think it's around like 1,200 calories extra. Even up, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's 1,200 calories extra compared to people that don't fidget. So just generally moving around and having like energy to expend versus people that are just like sedentary on their phones, desk job, don't really like get out or get around and move. That's not a metabolism issue. That's a non-exercise activity thermogenesis issue, which basically means you're not moving enough. So I think and it's just, and you can see it as well because there are people that are like, oh, my metabolism slowed down because I'm now in my 30s. But do you know how many super hot 40, 45-year-old women that are perimenopausal, but they've maintained their body composition? I see them all the time. They maintain their body composition because they've been active since their 20s. And there are people that are like, oh, like my metabolism is slow. No, look at your lifestyle. Really, like get a reality check. Sometimes I give my clients a reality check and they don't like me for it. But I'm just like, is your metabolism really slow, or are you just exercising 3 times a week for an hour and then sitting around for the rest of the week? Being like, oh, I'm just going to treat myself today with this thing. And then over the course of the week, the calories accumulate and then the lack of movement accumulates.
And that's something I also talk about when you say NEAT movement. So non-exercise activity thermogenesis is basically the unplanned movement you do in your day. So exercise is kind of like the planned movement you do, which is I'm going to go to the gym, clock in, 9 a.m. till 10 and clock out. But NEAT movement is the stuff that you do during your day, like fidget, run around after your children, do the laundry, go up and down stairs, walk, ride a bike to work, whatever it is, dance. That non-exercise activity thermogenesis is so important. And I say to my clients, and I say this online and people don't really understand it, is if you go to the gym for an hour a day and there's 24 hours in the day, and then you sit or sleep for 23 of those hours, it's still a sedentary lifestyle. And your blood sugar is going to get impacted. And so, you need to be, as you say, expending that energy. Also, I think that things that affect metabolism is gut health. And we don't really know what was going on as children. I mean, we can start to like dig and investigate with our families, but a lot of us did antibiotics, or we were eating in a way that wasn't healthy, or had junk food in our life. And so that all impacts the gut microbiome. And they're showing this in studies with like fecal transplants. They take bacteria from a lean, healthy individuals, like microbiome, and implant it into someone who's obese. And that person now can lose weight more effectively. So there's also a gut component to it, I think.
True. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's because so it's 2 things. There's a specific ratio between these 2 bacterial species called Bacteroidetes and Firmicutes. When that ratio is off, you're more likely to have metabolic issues. So blood sugar imbalance, which contributes to metabolic syndrome, or including blood sugar imbalance, plus bigger waist, weight gain, and so on and so forth. And then also when you have too much bacteria, the bacteria, because they kind of like they ferment food, they kind of extract more calories. So someone without bacterial overgrowth could probably extract 500 calories from a chicken and rice meal. But then someone with a lot of bacterial overgrowth could extract 700 calories from that meal. I will say that people do like to use a lot of these things as excuses so as not to take responsibility for the fact that they're overeating. In the sense that they'll be like, oh, I have gut issues, that's definitely why I'm not losing weight. And then you look at their food and they're overeating. And I've had clients who have a lot of gut issues but are slim, and I've had clients who have no gut issues but are overweight. So yes, it does have an impact, but you have to understand that ultimately it's your history of eating, your history of dieting, your current food intake, your macronutrient profile. So are you overeating? You know, maybe you're in a calorie deficit, but the majority of you're eating 200 grams of carbs and you're not an athlete, which I see a lot of the time. And I really, really think people just don't understand how much they're eating, because a lot of people that tell me I'm not eating anything, and I'm like, can you please go track your food and let's see what's going on? They're, you know, I remember I had a woman, or like a grown woman, that was like, I'm in a very low carb diet. Don't give me carbs. And then I was like, can you track your food? She came back and she was eating 200 grams of carbs because she was eating maple syrup covered seaweed as a snack. So, yes, and then sleep definitely plays a role, because if you sleep poorly, then your insulin levels are going to be affected. Your blood sugar regulation is going to be affected. Like we discussed, when you have blood sugar issues and insulin issues, you're more likely to store the food that you eat as fat instead of burning it for energy, and general movement. So yes, gut health impacts, mitochondrial health impact, your stress levels definitely impact, because one of the things that triggers the cell danger response with the mitochondria is emotional stress, not just environmental stress. A lot of it can be addressed if you are consistent for a couple of years, you know, maybe a year. But some people, I've seen people take like up to 2 years. You know, when you're 30 years old and you've lived an unhealthy life, you're not going to fix it in 3 months just because you did a low carb diet. And then also, if you suspect that you have metabolic damage, you have to work with someone that can track calories for you, tell you what calories to eat, know exactly how many calories you need to increase over the course of a week or 2 weeks, because it can get really tedious, to be honest. So yeah, so calories do matter. Are they everything? No, because your hormones impact the way, and your gut health impacts the way that you use these calories. It's not as simple as, let me plug in my height and weight, and what this calculator is going to tell me is a calorie deficit, because the calculator doesn't know if you've yo-yo dieted. It doesn't know what your stress levels are like. It doesn't know what your sleep is like. It doesn't know what your carb intake has been like. So it's complicated, but also easy to address, to be honest.
Yeah, and just a note on the low carb or keto for those listening, you really want to do this with a trained practitioner or professional, because Lulu did speak a lot about low carb, and it really is to train your metabolism, and there is a time and place.
Yes.
When I get clients coming to me doing all kinds of crazy keto, especially women, long keto diets, or they're so scared of carbs, I say carbs are not the enemy. And we're not talking about the unrefined stuff. Sorry, the refined stuff, like the candies and the pastas, the white sugars, the white carbs. I'm talking about like whole carbs. Like, those are not the enemy. And actually, you need carbs to be healthy, especially women, but men too, especially if you're stressed and training. But if you do need to fix your metabolism, or as you said, it's a treatment protocol, then there is a time and a place for it. But keto shouldn't be done for long periods of time, because you're not eating enough plants for microbiome diversity. So it can be dangerous, or it can
100%.
It can trigger
and it slows down your thyroid.
Yeah, it can affect your thyroid. It can trigger a stress response. So if you're doing it, please do it with a trained professional. Do it properly, and don't just do it by yourself. And there's a time and a place. It has to be treated like a treatment. Also, you know, you were like listing all the very important things to consider, which is movement, NEAT, and you said something about stress and emotional stress. The mental and emotional component is so important, because you're like, people have to take responsibility for how much they're eating. And I totally agree with you. And sometimes that responsibility is, I'm not feeling well right now and I'm comfort eating. And there's nothing that is, there's nothing about that that's abnormal. And there's nothing about that to be ashamed about. But just get the support that you need, and get real with yourself. Get honest with yourself that this is actually what's happening. And either you can do a lot of that work on your own, start reading, see a therapist, come see a coach, but get real about it. And it's actually a very normal and natural response to look for dopamine and serotonin when you're anxious, when you're depressed, when you're sad. And that dopamine and serotonin might be coming from overeating ice cream. It's a normal response, but it's not necessarily the healthiest thing for you. But we need to get real about it. Don't be ashamed. Don't feel guilty. Just get help, get real, and get the support that you need, so that you can really step out of that, because emotional mental stress is a real thing. Stress is not just deadlines at work and, office stress.
Oh my God, it's so complex.
Yeah, I'm glad that you pointed that out, because that's a lot of the work that I do, and that's why, we work so well together.
I know. I was just gonna say, you're right. Well, I completely agree with everything that you said. I think you cannot change from a place of denial. You really can't. You have to take complete responsibility for what got you to where you are. And you have to be super honest with yourself about, that, you know what, I'm not really like as consistent as I think I am. I'm consistent 4 days of the week, but those 3 days of the week, I'm kind of like emotional eating, and that's okay. But then you need to work with someone to learn healthier coping skills, which I think, Anya, is what you do really, really well. Because I've so many of my clients that have worked with you come back with just like the best things, and they say that you've changed their life because of the fact that they now are not just like easily triggered by their emotions or easily veered off track by how they feel or having a bad day. So yes, you're right. Taking responsibility is a big step. Acknowledging where you're at, and then figuring out ways to manage your life in a way that allows you to stay consistent. So important.
Lulu, this was an incredible conversation as always. Thank you for being here with me and for sharing all that you did. I hope we have many more conversations in the future, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think it was such an important conversation, and I'm so glad to get this out there, and hope this has a good impact on everyone that's listening. And yeah, I'm excited for more sessions with you.
Thank you for listening. Please share with family and friends that you feel could benefit from this episode, and make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a rating and review to support the show. Check out the links below for more information about my guests and where to find them. And make sure you're following me on Instagram at wholesome_practice to learn more about what I do. I appreciate you being here, and see you on the next one. This podcast is for educational purposes only and should never replace the advice of your doctor or physician. Always consult a medical professional before making any changes or adding anything new to your diet, lifestyle, or medication protocol.